Hey everybody, this is Rob Kientz with 𝑘𝙀𝙇𝙄𝙊𝙍𝙀𝙍. Today's video is very special for two reasons. One, I'm being interviewed in this case, and we're just replaying it on our channel, being interviewed by Ron of Ron's Basement. The video is out on his channel right now if you want to see it. We're just putting it on our channel. For those of you who may not know about his channel and may have not been exposed to him, and we think it's special also, number two, because it's a weekend edition, which we do not all that often, but it was a great discussion that I had with him that went about 45 minutes. We were talking about Citizens for Sound Money and the efforts to get sound money back in the States, but we talk about a lot of other things. We talk about what's going on mostly economically in the world, and it's just a really, really good conversation. I think you guys will enjoy this for a nice weekend view. And if you haven't done it yet, go check out Ron and his channel over at Ron's Basement. First of all, it was an absolute honor and pleasure to be on his channel, to be able to address his audience and to be a part of that. I want to thank Ron very much for that opportunity. But also, if you guys have not seen him, please go take a look. He's doing great stuff over there. I've started watching his videos. I love them. I think they're absolutely fantastic. And I think that we're trying to do the same thing, and that's reach people about the benefits of gold and silver, and also talk a little bit about what's going on in the world around us at the same time. Stay tuned for a very special video, my interview over at Ron's Basement.
Welcome to Gold Silver Pros.
Silver and gold investors are growing concerned. We have a government that's spending out of control, debt and deficits. Today, we have a special guest, Rob Kientz from Gold Silver Pros. We're going to start out talking about legal tender legislation, a movement that's going across the country, state by state, to allow state citizens to reclaim their constitutional rights to use silver and gold as real money. But we're going to talk about the overall gold silver market, that recent new record all-time high in gold, and maybe what we see for next year. Rob, welcome to Ron's Basement.
Ron, thanks for having me on. I definitely appreciate being on your show. Love the fact that I get to go on other people's shows. I always love doing that. And to be introduced to your audience really is an honor, and thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Rob. It's like I said, we're fortunate to have you here as well. And I think you and I would agree there's even one person who's more important than us. That's the viewer who's joining us right now. And they're probably growing concerned about what they see happening in the economy with the government. How would this legal tender legislation help the average gold and silver stacker? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the reason behind the legal tender laws are, if you go back in time in our history, when the United States was first sort of founded and we were getting our feet as a country, we had just, had the Declaration of Independence, we had the Revolutionary War, then the Articles of Confederation. Every country needs its own currency. And so what we used was what a lot of other people had used at the time, which was gold. And at one point we went bimetallic, and we had two metals. We had both gold and silver. And gold had been money for a long, long time. In fact, it's enshrined in the Constitution as money. In fact, there's no Supreme Court case that says gold and silver is not money right now, even though we all use something called a Federal Reserve note or an FRN. It's a green piece of paper. There's nothing that says a gold and silver is not explicitly money. There is, however, the monopoly on what people see as money in this country, put out by the Federal Reserve, which came about as a result of that legislation in 1913 that gave us a central bank. And so we're using this paper money. Now, at first, when that happened, it was backed by gold. And what was the government was supposed to do is they're supposed to say, okay, we're just making it easier for you guys to spend without having to carry around gold and silver in your pockets. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have silver certificates and gold certificates, and you'll be able to trade your money in for gold and silver. And eventually, as time went on, what really had happened was that the government and the Fed, really, because the government was running deficits. I mean, you talk about World War II, and you talk about other reasons why they needed to run deficits. It wasn't just war bonds, it was spending of currency. And eventually they diluted that currency. They printed more of it, the physical paper, because it's easier to print than it is to mine gold and silver. Then they had gold and silver. And eventually the people in Europe, who are our main trade partners at the time, said, wait a minute, we're seeing a lot of dollars around the world, but the US hasn't added to its gold reserves. And so they thought, what if I take this and I turn it into the Federal Reserve and I ask for their gold? And they did. to the tune of 2/3 of our gold reserves in the span of a few years. And France was first on this. France was all over it. But other countries in Europe did as well. So 1971, Nixon had to take us off the gold standard, and we went to a pure fiat system, which most people alive today, they've never known the gold standard or known gold as money, even though it's enshrined in our Constitution. Even though up until 1971, 3 years before my birth in 74, we still had gold effectively as money. It was backing our currency. But most people in this day and age, especially younger viewers and millennials, they have no clue. And people of my generation, we were born at about the time all this happened. So we don't know gold as money. So we've had these FRNs running around, and we've seen how they've inflated them. They've inflated them so much, we have such persistent inflation that it's causing people not to be able to have a decent standard of living. And if you go back and look at times in which we've had gold as money, or, because at some point in time we had gold and FRNs, or we had the Federal Reserve notes backed by gold and by silver with the silver certificates, or silver in our money. Pre-1964 quarters, dimes, half dollars, dollars had silver in them. And even in 3 years during the war, a lot of people don't know this, 42 to 45, there was a nickel shortage. So we started putting silver in our nickels, 35%. In any case, we had gold and silver in money, and we had dollars redeemable in gold and silver. And I'm giving the really long explanation, sorry, but and so it was money. But when that went away, we inflated it. We just started printing a bunch of paper, and now we've got what we have now. We have these rolling recessions. And when a recession comes, it's a world ender. 2008, and all I heard during Lehman was it's going to end the global financial system. Why? Because we printed so many dollars, inflated so many things, and then when that system, got so old that it was ready to collapse, they had to put it on life support and bail out the system with what? More debt and more money. So now we kick the can down the road. Fast forward to today, and we're looking at the system going, this is unsustainable. The Congressional Budget Office has said it's unsustainable. All the commercial banks have said everybody says it's unsustainable. We know that the system's going to fail. So what we're trying to do is say, okay, let's go back to having gold as money again. And the first question I always get asked is, well, if it's in the Constitution, why do you have to do this at the state level? Well, we got to do it because there's a particular provision put into statutory law, not the Constitution, not the common law, but statutory law, meaning the state creates its own laws under the Constitution. A lot of those I think are unconstitutional, but they're there anyway. And there's this one law that basically says you can use nothing other than Federal Reserve. I'm summarizing. You can use nothing other than Federal Reserve notes as money. But wait a minute. In the Constitution, it says gold and silver is money. And I don't remember a Supreme Court case saying you couldn't have gold and silver as money. It only said that the Fed could substitute the dollars and the Treasury could substitute the dollars. So, but in order to protect the citizens of each state, we're putting in legislation reaffirming Article 1, was it Section 10, Clause 1 or something like that, which basically says gold is money. And we're doing that to protect people. And 4 states have already done this. I believe, was it Utah was the first? There's a few others. We're now working in 5 states. I think Arkansas is one. Arkansas, I think, did it earlier this year.
Texas has legal tender legislation. Is that correct?
Legislation, but not the law. Now in Texas, there's 2 things, a couple of things that have to happen, really 3 things. One, you have to remove sales tax off of gold and silver. Texas has done that. I think 20 other states have done that. Number 2, you have to have a depository. Why? Because you need to have a place to put all this gold that people can feel safe. Not everybody wants to have it in their house. And also, we're encouraging the states to use gold in their own treasuries because it stabilizes portfolios. And I'll talk about a little bit more on that later if we have time. And third, recognizing gold as money and not at face value, not at the $20 or $50 you're going to see on the coin, but at market value. So that as gold goes up in price, you're retaining your purchasing power. And we're doing that, and we're doing it in Florida. We're 90% of the way there in Florida. And I work with a group, I'm not the executive director here, but I work with Citizens for Sound Money on the legislative team, which is run by Daniel Diaz, who's executive director. The group was founded by a couple of members. The main one proponent is my friend, Jim Forsyth, who runs Silverback Precious Metals. He has his own mint, former Air Force pilot, former New Hampshire state senator, and an engineer by trade. that also started Citizens for Sound Money, and that is to recognize sound money. It's educational, it's a nonprofit, but they also had this idea that what if we can pass legislation to make gold money again? Would that help solve the problems we're having with dollars and this debt system that we have? And so there are 5 states are concentrating on right now: Florida, Texas, but Texas is one of those unique states that meets, their legislature meets every 2 years, unless there's an emergency session. There's an emergency session going on right now to immigration, but we're not going to talk about the money issue. So in 2025, we come back to Texas. But for right now, it's Florida, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and one other state I cannot remember, which we're campaigning in. Florida is the big dog. The governor's office is in favor of this legislation. We have support from both of the houses, the state houses, the House and the Senate, and we think we have the votes to get it passed. And it is a Republican controlled, so most people will vote the same there. You get the benefit of the party vote. So 2 bills were created Monday, one for gold as legal tender in Florida and one to create the state depository. Those 2 bills are going to go to committee first. They'll go to 2 committees. They'll get reviewed. Any changes, whatever need to be made, and then it'll be put to a vote. And 90% chance that we'll get this passed in Florida. Now, we've had it passed in other states, but Florida's a big dog. Texas, Florida, California, New York are really the 4 big states. And so if we can get it passed in Florida, then we think that South Carolina and New Hampshire will come along. New Hampshire is very positive about this, but each state has a different process. Each state requires a different lobby effort. We went after Florida first because it's a big dog, because we've got DeSantis. Governor DeSantis has signed that anti-CBDC legislation. We felt like he would be amenable to looking at an alternative currency that wasn't a central bank digital currency. And he stated he doesn't want central bank digital currencies. His office is in favor. And we had to do in Florida, the main concern was we had to do it to where we didn't create any new taxes. So it has to be self-funding. So the system is self-funding. There's some fees and things in there, but it's going to create a state depository. It will create gold as money. And in addition, for those younger ones in the audience, it creates a blockchain that you can either do it physically or you can have it on the blockchain backed by real gold. So you can be on your phone and pay someone, and then they settle up, everything's settled up at the state depository at that point in time, but it's all backed and audited. And I'm a former auditor. I was an auditor for 12 years. So I made sure that in the bill, we had provisions that all these transactions would stand for 7 years and a day, that there would be periodic rotating quarterly audits, and that information be made to the public so that they would have confidence that the gold is there. And so this is a fully featured bill. And we took input from probably 6 or 7 other groups. They're doing this in other states. And so this bill is what we consider an omnibus one. It's written to address all potential objections, all potential differences in states, and to basically, what we don't want to do is different provisions in different states. We want every state to be the same so that you can move states and do the same thing, if that makes sense. And anyway, it's really exciting. I know I've taken a long time to answer the question, very long answer, but the point is, we think we're about to make gold money in Florida again, and we think a couple other states will follow, and then hopefully Texas in 2025. There's a big effort in Texas. We think Texas may do it. We've got a lot of support there in the Lone Star State. So we feel as though we're about to make gold money again. Why is that important? Because as we shift out of this dollar system into the CBDC system, you want to have a choice. You want some sort of physical money. Because if you don't have physical money, we have all sorts of problems with the central bank digital currencies.
Yeah, I think, we started out by saying, why is this important to our viewer? Well, it's important because whether we go to a CBDC or we stay with our current dollar, people are scared about the future value of the dollar. Is that a safe assessment?
Yes, people are really scared about the future value of the dollar. Not to get too technical, but I'm about to do a series on my channel. So by the time you guys see this video, I'll probably have this series begun, where we're talking about the new system. Well, what is the new system? Well, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, so one of these big international agencies that tells people, they do research and policy papers, but really what they are is their big daddy telling people what to do, essentially. And so is the Bank for International Settlements. They're the central bank to all the world's central banks. They fund the central banks. They provide policy guidance. They basically said, we need to move into digital currency. And you have the Federal Reserve and about 80 of the world's leading central banks, including the biggest one, the Federal Reserve, saying, yeah, we need to go the digital currency age. And so the Fed's been testing theirs. It's under a project called FedNow. There's other projects. And they've been testing interoperability, of these digital currencies. And so we're going to move from the paper era to the digital era. There are a lot of concerns with that, though. So we know the dollar is eventually going to fail. I mean, that's everybody knows. But they need to have the new system in place. So the green piece of paper you use now are going away. And this will be really hard for particularly the baby boomer generation to understand. This has been their entire world. And when we talk about this, they look at me and their eyes glaze over and they're like, we're not going to have green dollars anymore. And I'm like, no. And it won't be the first US currency to fail. It'll be like the 6th or 7th. Well, actually more if you consider the old state currencies that failed. And if you look at fiat currencies in general, over 1,000 of those have failed in history. They all fail because they all get printed too much. And then people lose confidence. You have hyperinflation. The whole thing collapses. At some point, that will happen to the dollar. And they're already, since 2015, have been planning the new system. It's based on blockchain, but it's not Bitcoin. It's not decentralized. It's centralized and controlled by the state. And so the state will control the money. And what's particularly nasty about that situation is in these papers by the IMF, they're saying, well, we need to control the money supply. And if it's all electronic, we're going to push button, remove money from your account. You know, we have too many electronic dollars in circulation. I'm going to push a button and take 10% out. So they're just going to take 10% out of your bank account. It's called a bail-in. Well, bail-in laws were written with Dodd-Frank. So that's law right now. So if they get the digital currency, they can play around with your bank account. And is all this unconstitutional, in my opinion? Yes. Is it better to fight it that way and try to get the law off the book? Or is it better to create an alternative in making gold money again, recognizing what's already on the Constitution, the books, the big book, you know, the Bible of laws in the US? I say it's better to do it that way.
Yeah, yeah. And you talked about, and I know Daniel Diaz from the Citizens for Sound Money refers to it as asset-backed digital currency. The new acronym, Rob, ABDC. Yes. We know CBDC, but ABDC. Now, a lot of our viewers, and you know, you've been in the silver and gold sector for years and years, they hear anything digital and they immediately have this response, which is, if I don't hold it, I don't own it. And I've tried to be a proponent of what's now being referred to as these ABDCs. And I liked what I heard from you. I'm actually an old auditor myself as well, that if we can have a asset-backed digital currency that's transparent, that's audited, that's regulated, for lack of a better term, that is fully convertible into real metal, that has to be the future for silver and gold. Am I thinking correctly when I think that way?
Yeah, gone are the days in which you're going to have all physical currency, and this is just an inevitability of life. If you look at the proliferation of technology, already blockchain is running the world's economy. And I'm not talking Bitcoin, I'm not talking the coins, I'm talking blockchain as in the ledger piece of it, the accounting piece of what people look at when they see Bitcoin. And if you're not Bitcoin people, don't worry. There's basically two pieces. There's the ledger, which is an accounting system, which is extremely efficient and self-checking, if you will. So you don't have to have auditors come in. I mean, you can have auditors come in, but the blockchain itself is a consensus mechanism that says, yes, we agree. Yes, I agree. Yes, I agree. Okay, everybody agrees, move forward. So it's self-checking as you go. It's the most efficient ledger system ever created under mankind. And it's already running the banks. And there's a version of it running the credit unions. And so underneath your bank account sits blockchain technology. And almost every portfolio stock account, every inventory system, they're all including this technology. In fact, I used to work in cybersecurity, and we were talking about using blockchain to record events on a network, because from a security perspective, if we had a log of all events on the network, we could catch the bad guys a lot faster. And if somebody tried to do a bad transaction, the network itself would reject it. So it would be more resilient to attacks. Anyway, blockchain technology is wonderful. We use it in a million ways. People who grew up before the advent of the internet and most of their life was in an analog world reject this because they're like, this is the beast system, referring to the Bible and, you know, the chip, and they're going to chip you and all that. Yes, but that's only if it's centrally controlled. If you have decentralized, agreed upon systems with people that aren't centrally controlled, You can't really have that system. So here's the thing. The world's economy cannot run on paper money anymore. It can't run on physical gold. Now it can as a store of value, but as a medium of exchange, the problem with gold is, excuse me, if you want to continue to increase your lifestyle, you're going to have to include technology. Technology is what increases your lifestyle. If we want nicer houses and nicer cars, and we want the internet to get better, and we want more streaming technology, and you want safer planes, and you want cheaper gas, and you want food from around the world, you know, most of our food travels 1,000 miles before it hits our dinner table. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of our food comes from Brazil, from Mexico, and not just from California, not just from Texas, not just from Florida. So if you want to continue to have all those wonderful things in life, you need tech. And gone are the days in which you can carry around gold coins and interact. Now, there is enough gold to do it. You just revalue gold to what it should be natively anyway. But that's not the point. People aren't going to carry around gold coins anymore. Or there's also a security risk of doing that. It's incredibly valuable. Yeah. 1 ounce of gold is incredibly valuable. And when we get rid of this old currency system, I think gold's going to go up to $10,000, $20,000 an ounce anyway. And now, in real purchasing power, not just in notes, but the ability of stuff that you can actually buy, 10 to 20,000 at least. You don't want to carry that around in your pocket. What if somebody mugs you? How do you give your kids lunch money to go to school? Are they going to carry like a 100th ounce of silver? Are they going to lose it? Technology is here to stay, and technology runs our world. And if you put the blockchain in a positive system that meets the needs of the people, then all you've done is you've created a very efficient system. And I'll use one example. Let's say you want to wire money, and you're going to wire money overseas, and it's going to cost you $40, and it's going to take 2 weeks. And hopefully it gets there, because I've done international wires before, and sometimes they don't get there and you have to spend hours on the phone. That's old tech. And it's very expensive and slow. On the blockchain, you can do this in a matter of seconds. The money gets there. The accounting system is self-consensus. Now, it doesn't mean it's perfect, but it's a great system for transmitting money. It's more efficient. And all an asset-backed digital currency is a privately created, not central bank, not government, not treasury, a privately created system. And when you take gold and silver, you store it, you audit, you do all that stuff. And then you put a blockchain on top of it, and the blockchain is just a record of transactions. And as long as you're auditing that and you make the blockchain accessible to people, they can check it, then you're okay. And all it is, the blockchain is just a ledger system. It's just a more efficient one. Instead of having accountants writing it down, you know, like who is it did it for Ebenezer Scrooge? It was his accountant.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Now the computers do it.
Yeah.
So asset-backed digital currencies is the private version of a more efficient currency system. Central bank digital currencies, to me, is the beast system. It's the bad one. Yeah. It's the one in which somebody else can control transactions, and, you know, this dystopian sort of, you know, society that we see in movies now, which I believe is a manifestation of people looking at control systems and saying, and that's our popular culture looking at it saying, ooh, things are getting a little, you know, hairy here. So asset-backed digital currencies like Kinesis, like Load, you know, Kinesis is a company out of Australia that's done this. And Indonesia, the 5th most populous country in the world with 270 million people, has just adopted Kinesis' system. It's a private system. The government's adopted, but it's run privately through their postal system, through hundreds of islands. And by the way, Indonesia is a bunch of different cultures all melded together in one country, different languages, different cultures. But it took like 3 years, but they got this system built, and you can make payments at the post office using Kinesis. And when that goes off well, they're going to expand it. And there's a country in Central America that will be announced probably next year that's also adopting Kinesis. So entire countries are adopting these asset-backed digital currency systems. They're more efficient. They're privately run. The governments don't control them, and they offer more efficient means of transactions. And when you talk about international trade, the old system breaks. The old system cannot handle the trade that we need to get product from here to there. So we're going to need smart contracts, electronic contracts. We're going to need asset-backed digital currencies, or else we're never going to be able to grow. Our lifestyle will never grow. Things will get more expensive. We're at that point in which the old system is breaking. So we have to have a solution. Asset-backed digital currencies are a way to transmit value across that system in a trusted way that people can agree on that's not centrally controlled. And so I'm very much in favor of these. And they're all backed by what? Gold and silver.
Yeah.
You're not backing them by Tether or Bitcoin or tea leaves or seashells or tulips. We're backing it by gold and silver. So
right. Or
the
paper
money's
or
there.
confidence
Back.
or just confidence, right? Which is what the dollar's based on now. Confidence in the United States government.
Well, I personally don't ever want to be on a currency that's backed only by the full faith and credit of a government, because the governments have always mismanaged their currency systems and have always, it's just inevitable. Government wants to grow. In order to grow, it's got to debase the currency. It happened to Rome, it happened to Britain, it happened here. So it's got to be backed with something of value. And if it's backed by gold and silver, I'm in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it seems like you started out our discussion with a great history lesson of the United States, and it feels like to me that our country was built on like the really great years where we made some real, not nominal, but real advancements, that we were built on a gold and silver standard.
100%. Our best advancements in quality of life occurred when gold was money. And then also when dollars were tethered to gold, but they hadn't overprinted them.
Yeah. And you go ahead. I'm sorry.
I apologize. I just had the postman walk up. I got distracted. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. So yes, one of the things I wrote about in my book, Drop Shadow, I wrote back in 2009. And this started it all for me. I wrote the book before I did anything else. Went backwards. I just needed to get it out on paper, my thoughts. Wrote the book. And one of the things I did was I looked at what is our technological advancement? What's our standard of living under gold versus fiat? And I did a big table. And it's clear when you look at the table, our most momentous achievements have been with gold as money. And yes, we've had some momentous achievements under the dollar. But when you look at the incremental value to society, it's not nearly as high as you would think.
Yeah.
The internet is huge. You could say that was done under the dollar, but that didn't have even as much effect as like industrialization did or other things. Gold, and not only that, but our not only economic, but cultural development, music, art, all of this flourished under a gold standard. Look at the crap we have coming out today. I'm sorry for the younger generation, but the junk that we call music now, I'm sorry. And some of it's good, but a lot of it's remanufactured, boring, non-imaginative. Where are the Mozarts of today? Show me the Mozart. Show me Beethoven. Where are those guys? Show me Leonardo da Vinci. I don't see them. We're making incremental improvements, but we're not making the astounding achievements in society. The U.S. Constitution was based on a gold standard. That freed man from slavery for the first time in human history. That was done under a gold standard.
And just looks, and you and I are about the same age. I was born in 1970. Obviously, we were too young to fight President Richard Nixon when he decided to take us off the gold standard, although we would have been complaining nonetheless. But just look at what's happened in the country since 1970, since we've been off the gold standard. Would you generally say that the middle class, that the majority of people have had major improvements in their lifestyle? I would argue the point that the top 1%, the 0.5% wealthiest people have seen some pretty substantial increases in their lifestyle, but the average person hasn't really benefited as much as during those previous periods. Is that accurate in your opinion?
Yes, it's very accurate. You look at what happened. Look at what happened to the U.S. after World War II, and we were still running on the gold standard, and we built up. One person could work, and you could have a nice lifestyle. You could go on vacation. You could save. You were saving in something that increased in value over time. It wasn't highly speculative like the stock market now, or the bonds, which I think is about to go through a giant bust after 30 years of being in a boom. It was a different lifestyle. And now two people are working and can barely make ends meet. The average family is making $70,000 a year, and they don't have $400 in their savings account that's not encumbered by credit card debt or house debt. People now, if you look at people with positive net worth, more assets or money than they have debt, is a very small percentage of the population. We are so indebted now that we have nice cars and nice houses, but we don't own them. We're renters. We become a rental society. We rent everything. One statistic that came out during the holiday season this year is the explosion of buy now, pay later plans.
Yeah.
And people have maxed out their credit cards. Credit card debt's over $1 trillion, the first time in history, $1 trillion. And God, the credit card companies, man, they're in trouble if people don't pay that back. How are you going to pay back $1 trillion? Who has $1 trillion laying under their mattress? But now it's moved to the retail sector. The retail sector is so desperate for sales that they brought back not layaways, but buy now, pay later. We're going to give it to you and you pay us later, wink, wink. We know you're maxed on your credit cards and you're maxed on your mortgage and you're maxed on your auto loans. We know a lot of you are losing your full-time jobs and getting part-time jobs, but we're going to let you pay later. Yeah, tell me how that's going to work next year when a lot of that doesn't get paid back. We're already $1 billion in the first 2 weeks of the retail spending season after Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
People don't have any money, and we're living on with this idea that we're in that same lifestyle as before, but to do so, it's on debt. And it's false. It's a false reality.
Mm-hmm.
And when all of that comes due, I don't know how people pay. And so people are basically essentially broke.
Yeah, and it feels like there's
Americans are dead broke.
Yeah, and it feels like there's a confluence. I mean, then you can zoom out and look at the national debt, right? We could talk about that for another half hour. And then you look at even worldwide debt over $300 trillion. I heard Ray Dalio say once, like, it was a little, light bulb that went off in my head. He said, "You've got to remember, everybody thinks they're going to get paid back." And it's like it's like impossible that all that gets paid back. It doesn't, it just and not in real value.
And if you look at derivatives, which are all derivatives are bets on all that stuff we just talked about. All that debt, debt is an asset to a bank. So if you have a mortgage loan, it's an asset to them. But what if you don't pay it? All of a sudden, it ain't an asset anymore. Look at what happened to the bank failures this spring. Their treasury and mortgage debt wasn't being paid back, and it destroyed their balance sheet, and they went under. Their cash flows were the same, but the debt rating went down and brought them under critical levels, and they went bankrupt. Debt is not an asset. It's a noose around your neck. It'll kill you. If you're a person, a bank, a government, it kills everybody. And that noose is tightening. And yes, it can all be paid back, but they got to hyperinflate the currency. We're going to have to print. And let me get back to the derivatives. So all that stuff I just talked about, the derivatives are bets on that. So in other words, we said, okay, what about mortgage-backed securities? I want to make a bet that I can earn 8% off of that. And so let's create more paper on top. We're at almost $1 quadrillion of derivatives, which also have to be paid back with interest.
Yeah.
So how much money has to be created worldwide to pay all that back? Every fiat currency in existence, I don't care what country you are, is going to have to hyperinflate at the same time. Yeah. Or it doesn't get paid back. And either way, you go into bankruptcy. Pick your poison. You're either going to bankruptcy because all your assets are really junk, or you're going to bankruptcy because you have to hyperinflate the currency to pay them back. And the currency is worth nothing that you get in return. You're still bankrupt. And if you don't have gold and silver, I'm sorry, but you're screwed. I don't know what you're going to do. I don't know. And that's why, going back to the legislation, we need to get gold as money again to encourage people to have a little, and silver as well. And if you want to do Bitcoin, I'm okay with Bitcoin. I prefer gold and silver. I have a little Bitcoin for diversity. It's okay. But gold and silver are it for me, because that is the only thing that's going to have real tangible value when this system blows up. You're 100% correct. This system, there's no way to go. They're locked in. There's no way to go. Going back to Kenneth Rogoff and Reinhardt's research, I think it was Yale and Harvard did this research back in 2008, 2009 during the last recession. And they looked at economies where you got 90% of debt to gross domestic product, GDP. So here's what you produce a year. When your debt level gets to 90% of that, you're in trouble. You're headed to a default event. Well, the US is something like 120% now. I don't know what it is, 110,
Yeah.
120. We're not going back. You can't.
No turning
Unless
back.
people say, I don't want my debt, you can have it back. It's okay. I'll lose everything. No, it's not going to happen.
You know, I heard this 10 years ago, Rob, and it stuck with me. I'm an old accountant, auditor myself, and this saying stuck with me. I read it on some Yahoo Finance message board, but I thought, to me it was so true. And the saying was that mathematics show no forgiveness on the altar of truth, right? When
That's
you look
right.
at they don't, right? Like 2 + 2 = 4 in Argentina, in the United States, in Turkey, in Venezuela. Anytime, I mean, math just when you look at the basic math of what's going on, it doesn't work, right? I mean, you're smarter than me, and we know interest rates and compounding interest and this doom loop, to put it simply, that we're in doesn't end well. But 99%, at least here in the United States, it feels like 99, 98% of people are just asleep, and they're like, well, as long as they don't want to look at what's behind their lifestyle at this point. And I think if they had any idea, they'd be shocked in terms of where we're heading.
Well, I think I agree 100%. I think there's starting to be awakening. I do
Yeah.
a lot of networking because I have a small business, and
Mhm.
networking really, there's two ways to run your small business. You have the retail store and you have people walk in the door, and I have the online store and I've got social media. But really, you still got to network around. You got to network with other
Yeah.
business owners, because they're your workforce. They help you with insurance and accounting and all that stuff. But they're also could be your customer and vice versa. So I do a lot of networking. There's one I go to, and most of them are my generation or older, so Gen X, most baby boomers. And they lived at a time in which if you were just honest and worked hard, you had a good life. And they're working hard and they're honest and they're not able to retire now. And I
Yeah.
sense that there is this quiet desperation. There's this, wait a minute, I did everything I was supposed to do and I can't retire. And most of the people I meet in those networking meetings are doing 2 and 3 things. And it's good. It keeps you young to have something to do. But they were supposed to retire and move off the roles and let the younger people take the jobs. That's always been, how things worked. It was sort of an apprenticeship thing, and then the older people retire and the younger people come on, and they built themselves up, and then they taught the next generation, and that's worked for generations upon generations. But this time, the older generation can't retire. They're working 2 to 3 gigs. They're doing side gigs. They're doing job. I mean, and I went into one of those meetings and I was talking with someone, and I could just tell they're like, I need to make a sale today. It's like there is no wiggle room there. But the sales are not strong. Retail sales are not strong. A lot of them are losing their traditional jobs, and they're late 50s, even mid 60s, and they're doing side projects. One of the guys I know is, bless him, wonderful guy, he takes old analog film and puts it into digital format so you can save your memories. That's his only source of income. And if people don't do that, he has no food to eat. And he previously had worked a professional job for many, many years. He can't retire. And that's coming to my generation too. And the scary thing is, the baby boomer generation holds half of the wealth in the country, and they can't retire. What about Gen Xers, millennials?
Yeah.
Not only that, the silent generation, most of which have died, have more wealth than the millennials and Gen Zers put together. Nobody can retire. So there's not enough money for anybody to reach Elysium, to reach retirement. Okay.
Yeah.
It ain't happening. Ain't nobody retiring right now, unless you're, like you said, upper half of 1%. The rest of us are working, but we're working a smaller pie, and it's starting to be panic time for people. And I think that's what's causing people to wake up. They're not paying attention to the Fed like I do. I'm a geek. I do that stuff. They're not doing that. They're just looking around going, where's this life I was promised? That's how they're waking up. And it is a rude awakening, man, because they don't have a lot of time left. And they're not in gold and silver. And I showed up at one of those meetings that I'm in gold and silver. And the first thing out of my mouth was, if you if you're preparing for retirement and you know you can't, you need to get into gold and silver. Because if you've been doing it the other way and you still can't retire at your age, it's time to change. And you could just see the recognition across people's faces. I think they're starting to wake up.
It's percolating. It feels like it's percolating.
It's just starting to bubble up. People like something.
Yeah.
It's not working like it's supposed to. And they don't have the data in their head like I do and you do.
Right.
But they're like, something's wrong. And they're starting to question the system.
Yeah.
And that's manifesting culturally and politically. And, you know, we probably don't have time to get on that in this show, but you see it politically manifest. There's anger politically, a lot of it.
Oh, a lot of people are angry. I spoke with a Missouri State Senator earlier in the week, and I think he summed it up like people are frustrated, angry, and I think sad a little bit too. I mean, I'm going to joke around with you and correct you on something you said earlier. We were talking about the 70s when, and I thought you described this so accurately. Like in my childhood, my dad, he was an enlisted man in the Air Force Reserve. He had one job, and we had a good life. We went to Disney World during the summer. And then around 1980, they convinced women that they needed to go to work. Okay, I mean they brought the women into my mom went to work a couple days a week, but still we were able to live a nice lifestyle. Fast forward to today. And I would joke around because you said now you've got the husband and wife, you know, two people working. There's two jobs. It's like no, there's more like 4 or 5 jobs because each of them has their primary job and a side gig. And you know, people are just really desperate. It's become a system. I'm sure you've heard this before. You know, gold is the currency of kings and silver of gentlemen, and debt is the currency of slavery. I was driving down the road here in St. Louis the other day and going by one of those, you know, there's these new apartment buildings going up everywhere. And I thought, these people that are living in these apartments paying $1,400 a month and paying $1,000 a month for their car payment, and they have $30,000 in credit card debt. I thought they're going to be, I hate to use the word, but like modern day slaves for the rest of their life, right? They're getting up, maybe they're working 2 jobs just to have that lifestyle. And it's I don't know, I don't want to be negative, but it's kind of a sad situation. But people are waking up. And, you know, to get back to our legislation we were talking about, you know, I think in states that passed this legal tender legislation, it gives at least people a chance to protect themselves.
Yeah, it gives them a chance to protect themselves. The first thing we got to do is get the sales taxes off of it. Why are you taxing money? We don't tax dollars when we exchange them. Gold and silver are money. Stop taxing it. And, you know, it shouldn't be capital gains on it either, because capital gains basically is saying, well, if there's a gain in the value of the economy, we're going to take it away from you through capital gain. That's what capital gains is.
Yeah.
When you invest and something goes up in value and the government takes it from you, the government's basically saying, anytime you create value in the economy, we're just going to take it right back away from you. Thank you very much. That's insanity. It's not what our founding fathers said. When you create this sort of neo-feudalist slavery society, that's not what they wanted. But so last 2 things I'll end on. One, for those people you just aptly described that can't get out of the system, you've got one shot. You can. You should be paying off debt, but if you can't, buy a little gold and silver, because when that gets revalued, that gives you a shot at paying back your fiat debts with gold and silver when it gets revalued. I'm not saying it'll work at this point in time. If you haven't started, it may be a little too late. I don't know, but at least get some, and then live way below your means and try to get out of as much as possible. There's a saying, and I'm just going to summarize. You know, debtors are slaves, and neither a debtor or creditor be. Because when the system blows up, if you're a debtor or creditor, you're in trouble both ways. You want to owe anybody anything, and you don't want anybody to owe you anything. And the way you do that is pay off your debt, get gold and silver, live below your means, and you've got a shot. If you don't do those things, you don't have a shot. And people need to wake up and see the world for what it is. Stop listening to your political leaders. I hate to say it. They're not going to save you. This is a world in which you have to save yourself. You have to educate yourself, you know, by visiting your show, by visiting my show, reading books. Mike Maloney's got a great book out. about what the system is going to look like of goldsilver.com. So many other people out there are doing great content. Go educate yourself.
Yeah.
You and I were talking about getting so busy, it's getting hard. And that's another thing. It's the creep of other stuff in your life that doesn't allow you to live the life you want to live. It's not just the money. It's that you're running on that hamster wheel 24/7. You can't have a life that you want to live. And so get off the hamster wheel. Do an Ayn Rand. Atlas shrugged. Atlas said, here, I'm not holding the world up anymore. You don't have to hold the world up anymore. It's not on you. Don't let that system weigh you down. Get out of the system. Just get the hell out while you can. That's my advice for people.
Rob, on behalf of myself and everyone who's joined us, you have provided an incredible education and insightful and engaging conversation. Thank you. You talked about what was it? Neither a debtor or creditor be. I'd never thought about that. Right? Like when the system blows, I don't want to owe a bunch of money. But I also don't want people owing me money because they probably won't be able to pay it.
That's right.
I can hold silver and gold. I've never thought about that. So thank you. The last thing I want you to do, please, you've been so generous with us. Give us your, how can people help you? How can people get in contact with you or learn more? I know you have a retail bullion store, and you've not done. You haven't taken advantage of this to promote it, but I want you to please let people know how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, so the easiest way, if you just want to chat with me, is info, that's INFO, at goldsilverpros.com. You can see 2 videos a week I do on YouTube. Just look for Gold Silver Pros, you'll see me. And then Twitter, we do daily stuff, 3 or 4 postings a day. We try to do a lot of information. I'm very informational based because I want people to have the information to arm themselves with knowledge so that they can educate and grow. And so we do it that way. If you're interested in gold and silver, it's www.goldsilverpros.com. There's a link there on the discount page to put yourself on a list where I will call you, and I will call you. It won't be anybody else, it'll be me. And I'll walk you through what you need to know before you buy your first gold and silver. And you don't even have to buy it from me, I don't care. But I'll give you a little education, research, maybe send you a free copy of my book that I wrote back then, so that you can kind of get started on this journey. Because I just want people to get started. Whether or not you buy stuff from me, I don't care. Get started on your journey. Educate, 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 please. That's the key thing. Educate yourself.
Thanks, Rob. And we'll look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your program and to see your viewers. And I appreciate this so much. And we'll run this on our channel too this weekend as well. So we'll have it on both channels. That way people can get exposure to yours, because I want them to go over and take a look at you, because I know you've been in this for years. You put out tons of videos, a lot of great content. And, we're different in the way that we present. So we may reach different people. And I think it's an opportunity for us to kind of get more people involved and get more people educated.
I agree 100%. We do reach probably different segments of the viewer audience, but you and I share the same goal, which is silver and gold. So, all right, Rob, have a great rest of the day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.